So I labored at home for 3 hours and then 5 hours at the birth center. I was sitting on the toilet and, trying to work baby down, another cervical check. And the midwife, she was like, "You're only at a 4." And I can't believe that I thought I was hearing something. But she told me, she was like, "I need to leave for vacation in a few hours and we need to have this baby." And
What?
I broke down.
Hi, I'm Kayla Heater, follower of Jesus, wife and mother of 5 children, Christian childbirth educator and doula, and your host of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, where we share God-centered birth stories, evidence-based birth education, and our pursuit of surrendering our birth plans to God. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm going to attempt my best to not sound as tired as I actually am. Ooh, Indy is cutting 2 more teeth right now, and he's my one child so far who does not handle teething well. But we're doing some of the earthly teeth tamer and a lot of nursing, and we're doing our best. But anyways, excuse me if I don't sound as peppy maybe as I usually do. I also had a big weekend. Myself and some bridesmaids and a friend all got to throw my sister her bridal shower this weekend. So that was fun. My sister's getting married in October, and we got to throw her a shower and hopefully help her to feel loved and adored and excited for marriage. So that was really fun. And the weather. Can you believe? Well, I don't know. It depends on where you're listening to. But if you are in central North Carolina, we have been having some beautiful, beautiful weather, just like mid 70s, maybe low 80s at the most as the high, cool, crisp mornings and no rain. And just, this is my favorite. This has just been the best. I absolutely love September. My birthday's also in September, so I think that helps. But oh man, bring on more September. We're here for it. Last week was our big 1-year anniversary episode. I hope y'all got a chance to check that out with our walk through the first year of parenthood. If you haven't, go back and check it out. It was fun. I always love doing episodes with my husband as he's more of a co-host than a guest, I guess, at that point, but that's always a good time. And but today we have our first birth story of season 2, because that's what we're mostly here for, are these surrendered birth stories. And I am extra excited about this story in particular, as we have actually, in all of season 1 and all of last year, we didn't have a single free birth story. So I'm excited to have one here today. And let's go ahead and introduce this week's episode. When you hire a midwife, you expect to get more holistic care than when you hire an OBGYN. But when your midwife is part of a hospital medical system, that's not always the case. So next time, you hire a midwife at a birth center. But even then, you're still handing your care and responsibility over to yet another system bound by policies that may or may not have your best interest at heart. So what do you do after 2 traumatic birth experiences at the hands of others? You have a wild pregnancy and a free birth, but you do it in connection with and guidance from God. And this is only the tip of Cursty's story. Tune in as she shares all 4 of her birth experiences, among other life events that dramatically affected them all. Grab the tissues. This episode is a tear-jerking treasure. Welcome to another episode of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast. I am your host, Kayla Heater, and I am excited to have our guest on today. I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your life. Let us get a picture into who you are and what your day-to-day is like.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. This is so sweet. My name is Cursty. I live in Madison, North Carolina. My husband and I, we have been married for 11 years. We have 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl, ages 10, 7, 3, and then a little 16 or not 16, 16 month old. And yeah, we love home. We do everything at home pretty much. We love traveling and love, exploring, but home is like always our safety net, always our home base. So we homeschool, I home birth, we have homesteaded in the past. We have a home garden. We love all things home. And it's really just like our comfort net. My husband's a teacher, and it was his idea for us to homeschool. He was like, no way are kids, going into certain systems. And so that's what started it. We've been homeschooling the whole time and just really enjoying it. I love to garden. I love iced coffee. I love a good farmer's market. And yeah, just like trips with the family, just day trips out to different playgrounds, different museums. Yeah, so that's a little bit about us.
Oh, that's wonderful. That sounds really very similar to us. I mean, my husband's not a teacher, he's a worship pastor, but everything else you said, I'm like, oh, yeah. So, do y'all have family here? You said moving back here. So, did you live here before?
Yes. Yeah, I grew up here. I grew up in Eden, and half of my childhood was spent in Eden, half in Thomasville in the Walberg area.
Okay.
And my husband and I met at High Point University. He's from Rhode Island, and but we met in college, and we lived here. We lived in Greensboro. We've lived in Eden, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and finally just bought a house in Madison. And I am hoping we are here for a while. We've been together 11 years and have moved 11 times, and
Wow.
we are done for a while. Hopefully, if the Lord willing. Yeah.
Wow. That's exciting and that is fun. And I'm glad that you are in a place where you feel like you can put some roots down and settle for a bit.
Yes, yeah, I'm hoping so.
Let's talk about your birth stories. Let's talk about your pregnancies. You've got 4 kiddos. So
Yeah.
let's start with the first one. What was it like finding out you were pregnant for the first time?
Well, I was ecstatic. I was just so over the moon. I have always wanted to be a wife and a mom. Like that was top priority for me, wife and mom. And my husband and I, it took us just a few months to get married. On our very first date, which we were friends before, but on our very first date, I told him, I was like, I think we're going to get married and I want at least 5 kids. And he was like, yeah, let's do that. So we got married in such a rush and we were so ready to be parents. So I got pregnant with Zaylin 3 months after we got married. And I thought in those 3 months that something was wrong with me. I was like, I'm not getting pregnant. I'm tracking everything. Why is it taking this long? And I remember being so upset those first 2 months when all the tests were negative. And then my cycle would come on. And then the third month, which is crazy looking back at it, because sometimes it just takes time. But the third month, I took the test and I could not wait to tell Zach. He was out, it was in the morning. So he was off at work. And I wanted to do the surprise. I wanted to surprise him. And I could not wait. I was so happy. And yeah, it was sweet. It was sweet.
Aw. So knowing that you wanted to, get married and have kids, like right away, did you know like what kind of birth you wanted to have or what kind of care you wanted to seek ahead of time? Or was that something you learned like while you were pregnant?
Yeah, it was beforehand. I wanted a home birth, and I had kind of already dove into the world of holistic living. And my husband had gotten sick when I was pregnant, and that's what really sent me into that world. And so I knew right off the bat, I definitely want to have a home birth. But I was so young. I was 23 years old, and I had everyone around me of like home birth is dangerous and like the baby's going to die and you're going to die, like all of this fear. So this is my first time doing it. And then being in North Carolina as well, I just thought, oh, like home births are illegal. which is not the case, but on the outside, never knowing anybody who had home birthed, not ever having that experience, I thought that that was the case. So I decided I definitely wanted to be with a midwife. So we found a midwife in Greensboro, and she was great. During my pregnancy, it was in office, but during my pregnancy, we didn't do anything that was recommended. And she was totally on board. She was like, yeah, like your body, your baby, like we're just here to support you. I can give you feedback, but ultimately it's your choice. And she was great the whole pregnancy. And then we had decided at the time, Women's Hospital had the birthing pool and kind of had like the mother's suite. So it wasn't just like this completely sterile environment. So that was our plan until I was past 40 weeks, which I was with all of my babies. And the midwife got a little pushy of, the baby's too big. You're not big enough to birth this baby. I'm only 5'2". And she was saying they'd done an ultrasound and measured him at 11 pounds, and which he was chunky. He was almost 10 pounds, but he was not 11. And so she was like, I was 40 weeks and 6 days. And I went in the office for like the stress test.
Non-stress tests.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, the non-stress test. And she had, the baby was too big. I was too little. The baby wasn't moving as much in my belly as she wanted him to, which of course he wasn't because he was so squished in there. And I hadn't felt a single contraction. There was no Braxton Hicks. There was no sign of anything, no dilation, no mucus, like nothing. So she told me, she was like, we need to get this baby out. And
Only because he was big.
he was big. Yeah.
And
And
that
he
was
wasn't
it.
moving. Yeah. She was like, he's not moving as much in your belly.
Enough.
Yeah. And so it kind of scared me. I was like, okay, am I really putting my baby at risk? And and she was very kind with it. She was like, listen, we can either get you to the hospital and do a C-section like right now to get him out, or I can start you on Pitocin, but you're a first time mom and you have no contractions. You have nothing that tells me that, your body's starting labor. And so we can do the Pitocin and it's going to really hurt. The contractions are going to hurt. It's going to take probably at least 24 hours and you'll probably end up with a C-section anyways.
The midwife said all of this?
A medical midwife, yes.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so, yeah, and now I know there is a difference.
Yeah.
So here I am, like I just turned 24 and I'm anxious for this baby. Like I am like waiting day and night for this baby. And I think just like the fear from her mixed with like the fear from my family and the excitement of wanting him so bad, I was like, yeah, well, the Pitocin sounds like a really horrible experience. So let's do the C-section. And I agreed to that. And we went to the hospital and he was in my arms like an hour later. Like it was
Wow.
very fast. And we had a nice hospital stay. Like it wasn't bad. Everyone was very respectful of, what we wanted to do, what we didn't want to do. And I was so overjoyed with this baby, like having my baby that, I mean, I was just on cloud nine. And it didn't even matter who said what or who did what. I was just so busy in the newness of it and the excitement of it.
Wow. I mean, I don't know your birth story, so I'm just like, whoa, we went from planning a home birth to a hospital to a C-section in like an hour.
Yeah, no, it was very quick. And I think maybe if I had sat on it a little bit longer and if I was more knowledgeable about it, and if I had someone in my corner saying, you're not putting your baby at risk, maybe I would have chosen, like, okay, let me just get something to eat and go home and I'll
And think
think
about
about it.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it really sounded it was like the nurse and the midwife were very much like, your baby's not moving. Your baby's too big. You can't birth your baby. And then the Pitocin scared me to death. Like I
Well, yeah.
never wanted any of that. That like completely terrified me. So to me, the lesser of two evils was just going with the C-section.
Hmm.
And yeah, so it was completely different than I thought. I didn't prepare whatsoever. Looking back now, I wish I would have known, to do like the vaginal swabbing after the baby was born, for the baby like to be put on my skin, not on a cold table with all these lights and strangers around. So I would have done things a little bit different, but a C-section wasn't even in my mind. I was so healthy, had the best pregnancy, baby was healthy. So to me, it was like, well, I don't even need to think about a C-section. So I never researched it. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that they did like a spinal. I didn't know you had to drink something. I had no idea. And yeah, it was like a shock. I think I was just kind of thrown into that, and which I did choose the C-section versus the Pitocin. And now I know I could have said no to both, but being so young and first time mom, I just didn't know, I had a voice like that.
Yeah. I mean, I know you said you were so happy, like, to have your son, but how do you feel like any of that played into your postpartum at all, or did your postpartum go pretty smoothly?
Absolutely, it played. My postpartum was rough. Like in the hospital, we were surrounded by all of the family. They were there day and night, and we had help with Salem. Like everyone was holding him. I did not bond with him. It took a few months for me to really bond with him. It felt like so many people were holding him, not me. I had a hard time breastfeeding, even with the lactation consultant. The lactation consultant offered me formula. The pediatrician offered me formula. My doctor, of course, it's like the newness, it's the hormones, everything. I was just handed over, like, hey, you need to see someone and get a depression medicine. And it didn't feel right. Like, it didn't feel like this is what it's supposed to feel like. But I didn't know. I just didn't know better. And so I did all the things. I breastfed fine the first like 2 weeks, and then it just completely went downhill. And we switched to formula. And also, I don't think my body didn't even know like he was being taken via a C-section. So my body was just like, nourishing this baby, protecting this baby, baby's out. And I don't think it well, I know it took a while for my body to catch up, for my hormones and my mind really to adjust to that. And I was so in disbelief that someone would let me take home a baby. Like we did the parenting classes. I was an older sibling, so I always took care of my siblings growing up. I knew the basics of a baby, but as far as like connecting with this baby and really knowing what to do, like my husband and I, we it's so silly now, but looking back, we thought that someone had to be awake with the baby at all times. We didn't know that we
Oh,
could sleep with the baby, like sleep while the baby's sleeping. So we took these shifts and like 2 to 3 hour shifts. So our sleep is completely broken. My husband was also sick at the time. His liver failed. And
whoa.
so he was so tired. He I was so exhausted. And then we had my in-laws staying with us in this really tiny house. It was a revolving door of people in and out, friends, family. And I wasn't nourishing myself. And it was rough. It was really rough. And probably 2 to 3 months in, it just felt like, who is this baby? And is this really mine? And did someone really let me have my baby?
Yeah.
And it was pretty rough. And I'd say probably like, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. I kind of evened out a little bit. And then it was like the excitement again of like, he's mine and no one's ever taken him. And what a gift he is. And I don't know what that past 2 to 3 months was. That was crazy. It was wild. But like now, like I can start being the mother that I've always wanted to be. So it did take a little while to adjust.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, all those factors, you throw them all together, and that's going to be a difficult postpartum, a difficult bonding experience for sure.
Yeah.
So now he's a few months old, and you,
Mhm.
you said you wanted 5 kids. Um,
Yeah.
so, so how long did y'all go in between your first and second child?
Yeah, so Zaylen, he was a little over a year old. I'd probably say maybe 15 months. I found out I was pregnant again and was so crazy over the moon again, like just so excited. And a few weeks later, even before I had gotten care, I ended up bleeding. And I just thought, I looked it up online, like, can you have a period when you're pregnant? And, online is like, sure, you can have a period or you can spot, but it was a very intense period, a lot of cramping. And I was in a very stressful family situation during this time, which I think contributed to it. But it was very intense, a lot of cramping, a lot of blood, like big chunks of blood. And it hit me that that wasn't a period. Like that's when it hit of like, that's my baby.
Right.
And yeah, but it was so fast, and I was in such a stressful situation, staying with different family members while we were in transition for a move, and I kind of just stuffed it down. Like, my husband and I talked about it, and yeah, I don't really like talk about it still. Like if people ask me, how many kids do you have? Like I have 4. Like that was the, if we found out we were pregnant, or, I was pregnant, and then I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks later was this miscarriage. And so that was tough, but I don't think I really dealt with it until years afterwards.
Yeah. Was it just something that came up all of a sudden several years later, or was it something that you gradually worked on over the years?
Uh, I think it maybe just came on all of a sudden because we were in the transition of a move. It was so busy. It was such a busy time, such a stressful time. I mean, I was so stressed out, and I think that I know that that's what contributed to it. And yeah, but I think I kind of just like stuffed it down and was just like, okay, well, the baby was just a few weeks old, and I didn't see anything, and it wasn't like I went into the hospital. My belly wasn't showing, and so yeah, I kind of just like wrote it off and didn't really grieve. Like that was a baby, like that was a my child, my baby, until years later when I really sat with it and processed that.
Well, I'm glad you were able to process that eventually, even if it
Yeah, yeah.
was years later.
Mhm,
Okay, so then after the miscarriage, I mean, you ended up getting pregnant again. How old
mhm.
was your son at that point then?
Yeah, he was 2. So he was when my second son, Abram, was born, Zaylen was 3 years and 2 months. So he would have been 2 when I found out I was pregnant.
And so were these pregnancies ones that you were planning, or were they just sort of like they just kind of happened?
Yeah, well, we were not doing anything to stop any pregnancy, and I was looking forward to being pregnant again. I was very, very happy to be pregnant again, and so, yeah, we were active in that.
So then, knowing what happened the first time, did you do anything differently the second time in terms of like seeking care or knowing like where you wanted to deliver, what you wanted to do?
Yep, so we were back in North Carolina at that time, and I knew I did not want a C-section. I absolutely knew I wanted a VBAC, and I did not want it to be in a hospital. But I was also still unsure about the legalities of a home birth. And at the time, I did not know that like Facebook home birth groups existed. I didn't know anybody who had had a home birth. All I could read was what was online, which is, home birth is illegal here, which we know it's not, but just reading what's on Google, um, I still didn't feel like I had a chance with that. So we looked up a birth center and that's what we had planned. And I still wanted a midwife. I wanted care, but I still didn't at that point it still didn't even register that I had had a miscarriage. It was such a short window between finding out and the loss. And like I said, I just kind of stuffed it down. It didn't really like hit me what had happened. And so, yeah, we had sought out a midwife and we ended up at a birth center in North Carolina.
Which birth center? Because this would have been 7 years ago.
Yeah, he just turned 7 yesterday or 2 days ago. Yeah, so it was natural beginnings.
Okay. And were they allowed to do VBACs back then?
They were, yes.
Okay. Well, that's
Mhm.
good because I think that has changed in the recent years.
I
Yeah.
believe so. Mhm.
So, how was your care in your pregnancy and your experience like with the birth center midwife versus when you had the hospital midwife, especially when you went over 40 weeks?
Sure. Well, the care really wasn't that off. It was very similar. There was one midwife that I loved, like absolutely loved, and there you have to switch around. You have to see them all. There were two that I was not crazy about, and one I definitely did not want to birth with. But the other one, it was just like, well, we don't really see eye to eye, but I can, like, she can be there. That's fine. And yeah, the care was the same pretty much. They were very respectful of our wishes during pregnancy, during birth. And yeah, the care was really nice.
So, then how late into the pregnancy did you end up going before you went into labor?
So I was 41 weeks and 5 days, and they would not allow me to birth past 42 weeks. So at that point, I didn't do anything. I just did a lot of walking and like squatting. I didn't know about like cocktails or all like midwife's brew. I was just like, well, I'll walk. Like baby has to come out. But we were getting closer, and I was getting a little anxious of like, okay, what's going to happen if I go past 42 weeks? Because I definitely did not want to be in a hospital again. But it was 41 weeks and 5 days, and the day before uh, I started contractions and knew that that was it. And I was at home most of the time. I felt so good at home. Like I felt like I could just birth the baby. And we had some family over. I was in contact with my doula about it, and it was a really bad storm. We were an hour away from the birth center, one of the worst storms I have ever experienced, still to this day. My husband is like half blind without glasses, and he had to drive. So it was at night. It was maybe midnight whenever we decided to go in. So here we are. I am in like full on labor in the passenger seat, giving my husband directions through the rain, like through the storm. And it took us a long time to get there, but we ended up getting there. And that's when things shifted for me. That's when I started feeling pain. And I was not prepared for that. Looking back, I'm like, what was I doing the whole pregnancy? Because I didn't know that it was going to be so intense and so painful. I just thought, like, oh, women do it. Women give birth. Like, I can give birth. And that's crazy to say after, on my second child that I still didn't even know what to expect, really.
Had you taken any classes or read any books or anything?
Oh, yeah. We have read the books, and, I heard that, that there would be pain. But to me, it was just like, oh, it's just going to be pain. I did not know it was like a whole body, like completely crushing experience. And I did not ever lean into the spiritual side of it,
Mm-hmm.
the emotional, the mental. I was just like, "Oh, this is body, like, I can just deal with the body thing."
Mm,
And which is crazy, like,
yeah.
it's I thought I was prepared and I was not.
I mean, I think the mental, emotional, and spiritual side is like 90% of it, and the body is like
Yes.
10% of it.
It is, it's so true, it really is, and looking back, after 4, I can definitely say that is the truth. But yeah, once we got to the birth center, I shut down. One of the midwives that I wasn't fond of was there. And there was like 3 or 4 nurses, I don't even remember, that I don't even remember ever seeing in practice. Like they were so new. So I'm like in labor land, like trying to stay there, work the baby down. There were so many cervical checks. And
Really?
like I just kept getting pulled out of labor land and into the room, and so many questions, so much talking. And I was just completely pulled out of it. I think this was at like 5 in the morning. So I labored at home for 3 hours and then 5 hours at the birth center. I was sitting on the toilet and, trying to work baby down, another cervical check. And the midwife, she was like, "You're only at a 4." And I can't believe that I thought I was hearing something. But she told me, she was like, "I need to leave for vacation in a few hours and we need to have this baby." And
What?
I broke down. I broke down, like scream crying. I was like, "Just take me to the hospital. I don't even care. Like, I just want the baby out. I can't be here anymore." So my husband took me to the hospital, and it's right by there.
Yeah.
So he drove me. As soon as we get there, the midwife that I loved met us there at the door of the ER. Like she got there within 5 minutes. My water broke and we got back to the birthing unit, and the doctor comes in and he's like, "Well, your baby's," it was another cervical check, and he was like, "Well, your baby is here, but he's stuck." So he said they needed to use the vacuum.
Wait, so you went from 4 centimeters to your water breaking to the baby being like right there? Were you completely dilated?
Yeah, yeah, he was like totally there. With
Wow.
just a few minutes. Yeah. And which is crazy because that's how my other births went. Dilation was very, very fast. But yeah, I really couldn't believe that. That's what I kind of questioned. Like, did she just say that? Like that, did that really just happen?
And that plays into the mental game of birth. Like, then now
Yeah,
you have all this pressure on you because now it seems like someone else needs you to have your baby for their convenience. And
yeah.
the pressure that adds to the situation already. I'm astounded. Well, we will show her grace and say that she made a mistake and hopefully has not done that ever since, but that I'm sure that had like an everlasting impact on you.
It did, yeah, and I worked through it, and it was what it was, and I think that having the birth that I did in the hospital went on to give my other children a different birth. So, I mean, it all worked out, and yeah, it was just crazy at the time. It was a pretty, intense whirlwind.
So you're at the hospital and you're with the midwife and the midwife you love, and you're with the
Mhm.
doctor, and he says, "Well, your baby's right here, but he's stuck."
Yeah, he was like, "He's right here, he's just stuck."
Had you started pushing?
No, no, there
Well,
was
so
no
how did he
push.
know he was stuck?
Yeah. I don't know if it was like a lip or like the cervical lip or something, but yeah, he
Oh,
did
okay.
a cervical check and baby was like right there. And this is a lot of my husband. I don't even remember, like, I remember being there, but I don't remember anything that was like in that moment. There was so much pain. It was so intense. I've got so many people around me, the bright lights, and I just want this baby out. And I was kind of just like, "Take me in. I'll have a C-section if I'm not dilating." But my water broke literally as soon as I stepped out of the vehicle, and the midwife met me right there at the ER doors, they wheeled me back, and the doctor came in, did the check, and he was like, "Baby's stuck." And I think they got me to try to push. So I'm like on my back trying to push, but I think it was like just a minute maybe. And he was like, "We need to use the vacuum." So they did the vacuum. And even then, I had no idea what that was because it wasn't even anything that I thought I needed to prepare for.
Mhm.
And so they did that. I pushed maybe another minute. Like it was very quick. It happened very, very quick. From the time I got there to had him was like 5 minutes. It
Wow.
was it was all very, very quick and intense. Um, so he came out, and again, they didn't. I don't know if it was like his breathing or because of the vacuum. I left that hospital and like never looked back. I never looked at charts. I never asked questions. We just needed to get out of there. But looking back, they didn't give him to me right away, which is what I wanted. But the nurse was being very rough with him. Like she was like tossing him almost, like laying him on the table, lifting him up to check him. And I just remember because I was crying at this point. I'm like, I just need my baby. Like, what just happened? Give me my baby. So I'm like, be easy, be gentle, be gentle. And she just snaps at me and is like, I've been doing this a lot longer than you have. And so my doula's there, my midwife's there, like they're like calming me down. And the midwife did step in and she was like, no, like give her baby. So she ended up giving me the baby. And the hospital stay was rough. Like I was fine, baby was fine, they did all the checks, but I wanted to get out of there. I didn't feel good there. I did not feel safe there. The nurses were rude. One questioned why I wasn't wearing clothes. The same day that I gave birth, I just stayed naked in the bed. And she told me, she was like, you can put a bra on or like you can put a top on. And and here I am, like, I've never given birth before. This is all brand new to me. I've just had a C-section, and which is a form of birth, but I've never physically pushed out a baby. And I wanted to breastfeed so bad, like so bad, because my previous relationship with breastfeeding wasn't well. And I was like, well, baby has to be on my boob. Like, why would I put a bra on? And then the pediatrician was awful, like so awful. And he was like, the choices you're making are the worst choices you'll ever make. Very condescending. And and we were about to move again. We moved through when he was 3 weeks old. So I told my husband, I was like, we have got to get out of this hospital. Like, you need to get us our discharge papers. And they did let us leave a day early than what they would have kept us. But, I there was some days I even turned my phone off because I was like, "They're coming to get my baby." The pediatrician didn't like what I was doing, the nurses didn't like what I was doing. "They're coming to get my baby." And
What did they not like that you were doing?
well, the clothes for this one nurse was very, like,
Like the fact that you were naked because you just gave birth and you wanted to
yeah,
lay skin to skin with your baby with a blanket over you?
yes, yeah. And that was like it was so hard. It was so hard because
I
I
don't
was
put clothes on for
confused.
like the first 3 days after I give birth.
Yeah. And it was just a scary situation. We had declined certain things, and the pediatrician was just like, "Well, why? Well, why? Well, what's your reasoning?" "Well, you're gonna hurt your baby. Well, if you don't do this, you're gonna hurt your baby." And
Ugh.
his final words were that, like, "What you're doing is the worst decision you'll ever make."
Oh my
And that was
goodness.
the point where I was like, I don't feel like me and my baby are safe here. And so yeah, we ended up leaving, and I like turned my phone off because I was like, they're gonna call, they're gonna find out where we live. I thought about like going to stay with someone for 3 weeks. Like my mind was a storm, like an absolute storm. And then we ended up moving 3 weeks later and to Rhode Island. And once I got there, I was able to mellow out a little bit. But those first few weeks were again pretty rough.
Gosh. I am I am so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah,
Like,
thank you.
I can't just, I mean, you literally just went through one of the most like transformative experiences someone can go through in life.
Mm.
And it's such a sacred time and space. And that first minute, that first hour, that first day, that first week, it's like it goes by so fast and so slow at the same time because it's just such a surreal experience. And to know that you were having to defend yourself and advocate for yourself and combat people the whole time. And so I'm so sorry that happened.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a huge lesson though, a very huge lesson because when I had gotten pregnant my the next time, I was like, no way. Like no way is anyone ever hurting me or my baby or ruining like the most sacred experience in life here on earth. No one's taking that away again. And so that's what led me to my third baby. I had a wild pregnancy and a free birth at home. And it was the most beautiful, like single most healing experience of my entire life.
Wow. Tell us all about it. First of all, explain, because some people don't know what a wild pregnancy or a free birth is. So can you go ahead and tell them what that is, just so everyone's on the same page? And then I want to hear every detail.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, for a wild pregnancy, it is not having any outside medicalized care, or at least to me, that's what it was. I did see a chiropractor throughout pregnancy, and I did take care of myself. I took all of my measurements, fundal height, weight, growth, checked on swelling, did the blood pressure, oxygen reading, the urine sticks. I did everything myself at home. And it was a perfect pregnancy. Like I had not a single stress in the world. We were living in Rhode Island. We were just at the beaches every day. It was so healing. Like it was so healing. And he was my latest baby. Oh, when didn't find out the gender, no ultrasounds, and we had laid the babies down to sleep. I had him the morning I was 42 weeks and 2 days. So I went into labor the night before. Again, had an 8-hour labor, and my husband and I we laid the boys down, went out into our woods for this walk together under the stars, just like breathing in this fresh air. I just had on like the most relaxing moo. And I was just like, I would stop and like hold on to his arms. And there was no pain. Like it was just like a tightening. And it was beautiful. I was like, this is what I've wanted. Like, this is it. So, and this time I did prepare a lot better for like what labor is. And this is the pregnancy that I discovered Wapio the Matrona's holistic stages of labor, which it's free on YouTube to watch. The way she describes labor, I've never heard anything that comes that close to it. It is absolutely beautiful. And I highly recommend that to any pregnant mother. Um, she really details and she outlines how labor is like climbing a mountain. And so I was ready for it. And whatever I was reading, whatever I was digesting, I read all of Heather Baker's books and her podcast on unassisted home births. So I was ready for transition. I was telling my husband, I was like, during transition, I'm going to say I'm dying, but I'm not. I'm just in transition. So just tell me, Cursty, you're in transition. And I was like, even if I say to call somebody, don't call them because I'm just in transition. So I went upstairs. I had the most insanely beautiful bathroom with a clawfoot tub that overlooked the back of our property. I had the window open. I had the essential oils going, the music going. I had worship music on in the background. And I was just in the tub, like completely lost in labor land. My husband even slept the whole time. Like I needed nothing. I just wanted to be alone. And then transition hit. And I called my husband and I was like, Zach, I'm dying. And he was like, no, you said this is transition. And I'm like, no, I'm literally dying. And I'm on the edge of the tub, like screaming. I don't know how the kids stayed asleep. I am screaming. I'm hitting the tub. And I'm like, no, this isn't supposed to feel like this. I'm actually dying. Like, you need to call somebody. But he was doing what I told him to do. He was like, no, I'm not going to call because you said not to call because you said you would feel like you're dying, but you're not really dying. And we were able to get a good laugh out of it later. But I'm like, no, this is it. Like, tell the boys I love them. I literally thought I was dying. And so he was like, okay, like maybe I should call like the ambulance. So he ended up calling the EMS, and three guys like came into the door and like in the doorway, didn't even like get through the doorway. They were at the doorway and it all stopped. It was so peaceful. And I was like, oh, wait, that was just transition. I'm not dying. I'm going to have my baby. And the guys start like getting their bags out. And I said, no, no, just watch me. And I felt a few waves go through in the shower. I sat on the toilet for just a few waves, and it was so sweet. It was an older guy and two younger guys. And the younger guy goes, oh, I think you're going to push better if you're on your back. And Zach looks at him, and I just held my hand up and I was like, no, 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 like just watch me. And then I get down on the floor. I'm leaning over the birth ball. And in the most gentlest push, it wasn't even a push, it was just like a big, deep breath. Zach caught our baby and handed him to me. And that moment was like the most healing thing this side of heaven that I've ever experienced. And I got up, I walked to my bed, immediately nursed, and everyone's crying. I'm bawling. My husband's crying. All three of the grown men EMSs are like, they are losing it. And the older guy just told me, he was like, wow, like, thank you for letting us witness that. And the other two had never seen a birth before, had ever seen a birth. And so that was their first experience of birth. And in essence, that was Zach and I's first experience of birth. And um, and they left, like, they were like, that was beautiful, like, take care. And they left. And I was thinking on what Wapio the matrona is saying in some of her talks of how she as a midwife just sits back and she's like, the mother just wants a witness. The mother just needs a witness. She doesn't need anybody. She doesn't need anything. She just wants a witness to witness that she's doing it, that she can do it, that she's capable of doing it. And it was just such a beautiful moment that even technically, maybe that wasn't a free birth. I think that the free birth definition is like absolutely no one present at birth. I think at that point, I almost slipped into just an unassisted, like there was no assistance. There was only witnesses. And it was just so healing. It was so beautiful and so healing. And it really, I can't even think about that moment without getting emotional still almost 4 years later. Because I was like, I did it. I did it. Like, I did what my body was created and designed to do so well and so beautifully. And I can do anything. Like, I can absolutely do anything. And so that was our third. And it completely changed me. It completely changed me.
Wow. I'm over here with all the goosebumps and just thinking about everything. You absolutely did have a free birth. That was a total free birth. And I'm just in awe of you and so happy for you and for God's redemption in that.
Yes.
And how he was able to help orchestrate that and how everything went so smoothly. Do you feel like throughout the pregnancy and then the labor and birth, do you feel like God was giving you peace and giving you confirmation that like this is what you're supposed to do and this is how it's supposed to go? Like what did your prayer life look like throughout that pregnancy and birth?
God was in control of everything. And I think that was really such a difference in that birth and in that pregnancy too, was because it was just me, because I alone was taking responsibility for my birth and my pregnancy and what was going to happen. I think, or I know that I put more faith and trust in God than I had in my other two pregnancies, where I more or less handed over responsibility and trust and faith in the midwife or the nurses or the system. And it was a complete leap of faith. I mean, I had to hand it all over to him because none of it was me. None of it was my doing. I was only the vessel for him to bring forth life through my body, which he designed so wonderfully and so fearfully and perfectly. And that moment to that, that jump of faith of, hey, God created me for this, like for this exact moment. This is my entire purpose, is to be a wife and a mother and to birth. um and he helped me the entire way through, and it was such a praise to him, such a testament to him. And really, like, we wanted all glory to go to him. It was none of my doing. And friends or family would tell me afterwards. So we really didn't tell that many people what we were doing. They told me afterwards, you're so brave, or I can't believe you did that. And for us, like, our response was just, yeah, but God, like, but God. And all glory to him for holding us and sustaining us through that process.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I had my first in a hospital and then I had two at the birth center and then my fourth one was my first home birth, and it for me was, my favorite birth experience and the best night of my
Hmm.
life, and just absolutely incredible. And I feel like after that moment and after, I had him and I was holding him, it was like I could do that 100 times.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, I had the exact same, like, I was ready that day.
Yeah.
And even through transition, Zach told me it was only like 15 minutes. And I'm like, I can do anything for 15 minutes. Like,
Right.
the rest of it was so smooth, like so smooth, not a single pain, not a single worry or fear. It was just that 15 minutes transition. And then even like the birth process of him coming out was like, I tore a little bit, but it was, I mean, holding him and seeing what my body had just done, none of that mattered whatsoever. It was all completely gone. Um, and and I find that comparison too with salvation through Christ, of we have this old life, and but when we decide to accept Christ as our savior, and but believe and have faith in him, that old life is completely wiped away. It's completely forgiven, and everything we've done is thrown as far as the east is from the west. And I think birth is has a similar parallel to salvation. Whatever we have now, it doesn't even matter what was in the past, because look how beautiful, like, this thing is right here in front of us.
Oh, I love that. I love that analogy. So then I imagine your next pregnancy was at home.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, okay. So tell us about that one. Tell us about baby number 4.
Yeah, baby number 4, it was a little bit different. My sister had just died at 29 years old, and
Oh,
I was in the absolute thickest of the worst type of grief. And my husband and I had really, our marriage had died, like, completely died. And we were in the process of moving back to North Carolina. We were still in Rhode Island at this point, and we had planned on really separating. Like once we got here, we would live separate and, and just try it out, maybe just try to date again or maybe just try to be friends again. And then I found out I was pregnant. And I wasn't excited at first. It really I was excited like that same day. But at the beginning, whenever I first initially found out, I was like, what am I gonna do as a single mom of 4? Like what like I can't do that. I can't do that. Like I have to have him, we have to make this work. And I kind of freaked out. I definitely freaked out. I wasn't sure how I would handle it, and all sorts of thoughts popped up of, I can just live with family or I can just, ask for this or I'll get help this way. And I was going to make it work, but I was just scared. And so the first few weeks of pregnancy, I did get very excited for this baby. It was a baby, it was a gift. And how would I ever turn away a gift from the Lord? They are so precious. But after a few weeks, that kind of fear mixed with like, I don't know what I'm doing, mixed with excitement, turned into hope. Like, okay, if I wasn't pregnant with this baby, my husband and I would have separated. And, it might have not been permanent, but it would have at least been temporary. But there's hope. Like we have this baby. Like we have to stay together. We're married and we built this family. And because of this baby, we decided to stay together. And it was hard. And 2 years later, it's still, we're still on the up and on the healing from that. But I felt such hope of like, okay, like we can make the marriage work. We're just two people and we hit a hard time, but like we've got this. And then we have this new life and we're both so excited for it. And like this baby, she was almost the glue, like the glue to keeping everything just so whole. But because of the grief of the death of my sister and the grief of the death of my marriage, mixed with wanting to rebuild my marriage and trying that also with a 700-mile move with 3 kids, I was like, I need some support. My family did not want another home birth. Like they were very adamant about that. Being away for 5 years, we moved back almost with like no real connections or friendships. We've had to rebuild those over being here. So I didn't have a support system, and that's what led me to choose a midwife. So we found a home birth midwife, and she was phenomenal. Her care was incredible, absolutely incredible. And it wasn't only just care for the baby, it was care for me and care for our marriage. Like she was completely praying over our marriage. And every time we saw each other, what's going on? How are you today? How is he today? She would even talk to my husband. And I felt like I could really be raw with her and vulnerable. And she had a team praying for us. She was completely rooting us on and just loved me and loved our marriage and our family. And so it was a really nice fit. And I'm really glad I decided to get that support during this pregnancy and birth.
Wow. Okay. So you are pregnant
Mhm,
with your fourth. You just moved back home ish, but are
mhm.
reestablishing, connections. You have 3 small children. You are rebuilding your marriage. You're in grief over the death of your sister. Like, that is so many things that
Yeah.
are just like stacked on top of each other. And yet, this pregnancy is such a blessing and such a joy and such like the thing that feels like God used to get you through that time and to push you forward and to save your marriage. So then how did it all go down? How far along were you when you went into labor and how did everything unfold?
Mhm. Yeah, so I was 40 weeks and 6 days whenever I had our 4th baby. It was a Sunday morning at 12:36. So it was right after midnight. And it was a beautiful labor, absolutely beautiful labor. We had a hot tub set up. We didn't have the heat going, but like the bubbles, like it was all there. My husband took the kids to a birthday party, and I felt like going. I was a little crampy, but all my babies had been so late. I wasn't expecting this baby. I was like, oh, don't get in my head. I still have like 2 weeks left. Um, but I was pretty crampy. So I told my husband, I was like, I think I'm just gonna stay here. And I would go 2 hours without a contraction and then would have two or three that were 5 minutes apart. Like it never progressed. It was just so random. And I was updating my midwife, and in all of her experience, I mean, she'd been doing this as long as I've been alive. And she was like, oh, we still have time. They're not really picking up. But I told her, I have a feeling it's going to be soon, within the next few days, but I'm just going to keep you updated. And then at 8:30 that night, I had two that were 2 minutes apart, and I had to stop and like hold on to a chair. So I told my husband, I think this is it, but I don't want her to drive 40 minutes for it to not be it. But we ended up updating her anyways. And she was like, I'll just come over just in case. It's not a big deal. So she ends up coming over, and my sister came over. My other sister, she lived a few houses down on the same road. So she ended up coming over to help me get the kids in bed. She was helping just get towels ready, like get those things ready just in case. But I still, in my mind, I was like, this is all false. Like, I'm not having this baby, or at least not tonight. And then, so we were all just talking. The midwife asked to do a cervical check. And I loved that she asked. I loved that it wasn't just assumed if we need to do a cervical check. She was just curious, where are you? What are we doing? This was at 11 o'clock. I was dilated to a 4. And she was like, okay, we still have all night. We have all morning. You'll probably have this baby like tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. And I had a contraction that almost put me to my knees. And I was like, okay, that was big. That was a big contraction. I'm just going to get in the water. So I get in the water, completely in labor land, like just so lost in that. And there was, maybe Zach said it was probably about a 5-minute time period where I was in a deeper moan. And before then, there was zero pain, a little like tightening, a little discomfort, but again, like zero pain. But he said about 5 minutes of me like really like moaning. And I thought I was screaming. I thought I was like yelling, but he was like, none of us heard that. Like you were just like, had this heavy moan. And this is one of the most beautiful experiences. Again, I'm leaning over the tub. I have no idea that this tub even has handles, but I needed something to grab onto. I'm grabbing onto my counter. I'm trying to grab onto the tub, but it's so big. I can't like grab onto anything. And I'm feeling like pressure. And I'm like, I just need something to hold. Like I need something to hold. And in labor land, completely lost there, I see this vision of Jesus is knelt down on my left side, and he's holding his hand out. And I can see the hole where they pierce his hands. Like it was so real to me, Kayla. It was so real. And on my right side, I see my sister knelt down, and she's holding her hand out. And I grabbed both of their hands. And when I did that, I grabbed two handles on the outside of the tub. And I hiked my leg up, and I heard my husband. He was like, baby's coming. And my midwife said, no, she still has like hours left. And I was like, no, the baby is coming. And I sat back into my husband's arms, and my baby was born in the water. And I just lifted baby up, and I'm crying. Like he's crying, like, here's our baby. We've got this baby. And with 3 boys, I thought it was just going to be another boy. I wasn't even like banking on a girl. And it was a few minutes past, and the midwife asked me, she said, "Did you see what you had?" And I was like, "No, I didn't even think to look at the sex of the baby." So I lifted the baby up, and it's a girl. Like, it is a girl. And we all lost it. Like, I lost it. Like, just like ugly, heavy crying that I have this girl. And I looked up too, and my sister's there. My husband had called her and was like, "Hey, I think you should be here." I had no idea. I didn't plan on her to be there. Like, she left. She had left from earlier, but she stayed awake and she kept her phone on. And she told me, she was like, "I don't even know why I did that. But I just stayed up and kept my phone on." And my husband had called her when I was in the thick of labor land, and she was there. So I had both of my sisters there watching me birth this baby girl with really only an hour and a half labor. Like, it was so fast. It was so beautiful. And we just went to, we laid down on the couch and went to bed, and they stayed in bed for a few days, and it was just, again, so healing. Like, so healing and so beautiful. And I really got to experience like birth again. And just like you described, of like, I could do this 100 times. Like, I felt that, and I still feel that. Like, I I love it. I love it. B- Birth is just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So that was our fourth. Little Miss Mabel was our little girl.
Oh, so what are all of your children's names then?
Zaylin, Avram, Ezra, and Mabel.
I love it. I
Thank
have many
you.
boys as well, and a girl, one girl. So
Wow. Okay.
my girl came first, and then I had 4 boys. So
Wow. What a
yeah.
blessing that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they all it's a boy house over here, and the girl and I try and get away sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
But wow, I loved every part of your story. And I mean, I'm sitting over here like I could listen to this all day. Just, what do you feel like God taught you through these experiences? Maybe one experience or maybe all of them, but what do you feel like he taught you?
Yeah, I feel like just putting my trust in him, like, just when I take that leap of faith, uh, like, he has given us this promise of new life. He has given us this promise of eternal life with him. And there was never any fear. There was no fear in the two births that I really handed things to him, and I took no control over. I took responsibility, but it wasn't me leading the charge. It was handing over, me and this pregnancy and this baby to him. Those were, I mean, the most incredible births. And God just really taught me, like, he alone is my source of strength. He alone, nobody else, no midwife, no doctor, no hospital system, no medicine, not even myself, not even my husband. No one, I can't ever find that source of strength through another outlet but him. And that has really reigned true in my life since those births, of really recognizing what a weak vessel I am, and to never put my faith or trust in other people or in systems. Obviously, if we need it, that would be the way to go, but not to put my soul faith in that. That my strength comes from him and him alone.
Yeah. Do you have any advice? Anything that you would say to a mom out there or to a dad, or maybe they're expecting for the first time, maybe they're expecting for the 4th time?
Mm.
What would you have to say to them?
Yeah, I would encourage mothers and fathers as well to to put their faith in Christ and Christ alone, and to embrace the responsibility and embrace the design that a mother's body has. God designed us so fearfully, so wonderfully. And, we're told that in Psalms 139 that, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works. My soul knoweth that very well. And he made us to do this. This is his design, and his design is never flawed. It is never damaged. It is so pure and so intentional. And I would encourage mothers to really rest in that. And I would encourage fathers to really trust that. I've heard of experiences of, well, my husband won't let me birth this way. My husband won't allow me to birth this way. And I am a very submissive wife. I follow my husband wherever he leads us, unless I feel a very strong conviction otherwise, in which we would communicate that. But I would encourage wives, definitely submit to your husband and what he desires, but also pray for the softening of his heart if he, is very adamant about you birthing a different way than you want, or, that you desire. I would encourage, pray that God would open his heart and would soften his heart, because it's so beautiful, and not only beautiful and life changing for a woman, but also for a marriage. Having Mabel, it didn't like completely heal everything. We are still on the up and up, still, things to work through, but it was such a healing moment and a very defining moment in our marriage. And it has been such a blessing to my husband to witness me in those moments, in those birthing moments, and for him to catch our children and for him to be a part of that. It really is healing and beautiful. I would also suggest to definitely learn the stages of labor and to really know what you're going into, because like you said, it is 90% mental and spiritual and emotional. The body is really such a small piece of it. The body is just the vessel. Everything else is spiritual and mental. And I think it's important to know what's ahead, to know that transition is transition. And, definitely the video that I recommended earlier, it's just a speech. Wapio is on a podcast, but it's recorded on YouTube. If you look up Wapio the Matrona, the holistic stages of labor and birth, and it really is the most accurate description I have ever heard. And I think it's important. I think it's important to, know what's going on.
Yeah, I've never heard that. I'll definitely look at that probably right after this. I'll go
Yeah,
look at that.
it's incredible. It really is. And I listened to it all throughout my last two pregnancies. Like, I mean, every week it was, even sometimes multiple times a week, just to prepare myself. And then I would suggest too for mothers and fathers to keep in mind that birth is a very biologically normative event. It is so rarely a medical event. And if we really leaned into, the mother's body knows what to do, and the mother isn't going to put her or her baby in risk, at risk. The mother wants this, the mother desires this, the baby wants to be born, that, the baby doesn't want to be in there forever. I think that keeping that in mind could negate a lot of medicalization happening.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have a misconception in their heads just due to, society and culture, but thinking that the hospital is the safest place to deliver.
Mm.
And thinking that, if you're in a hospital, that means nothing bad can happen.
Yeah.
When really, statistically speaking, walking into the hospital, your chances of your birth plan going awry or negative things happening increase significantly
Mm-hmm.
rather than just leaving the mother alone and letting her body do what it needs to do, outside the hospital doors. That, 95, 99% of the time, whatever stat you want to put on it, things go smoothly. It's like, I was just talking to another woman and her husband yesterday for a recording, and they were going from like a hospital to a home birth situation. And, she had to present information to him and help him to understand the risks and the benefits of actually, the actual risks of birthing in a hospital versus birthing at home.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because I wanted to say this in the episode. He was like, "Oh, you mean I just get to like sleep in my bed and sleep on my couch instead of on that, crooked chair in the hospital? Okay, like
Yeah.
that sounds great."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, that's funny that, that that your sleeping situation convinced you more so than the statistics." But
Yeah.
I think what people don't understand is that like in America, like 1 in 3 women have a C-section, but it's 1 in 3 women birthing in a hospital have a C-section. Whereas it's not 1 in 3 women in the country, it's 1 in 3 women birthing in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you are a home birth mom and planning a home birth, that statistic is smaller. Like, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I know it's way less than that. It's like way less than 10% even, or maybe even 5. But
Mm-hmm.
and if you look at Ina May's statistics, the famous midwife in Tennessee at the farm,
Yeah.
hers
Uh-huh.
are like, what, like 1%, like 1 point something percent, 2%
Mm-hmm.
C-section rate, which is like unheard of. But it's just when you leave the mom alone and you let her body do what God designed it to do, and you don't intervene, and you're not pressuring her, and you're not putting a timetable on anything, and it's just amazing what will unfold. And yes, her mental state plays the biggest factor in that, and your environment and your preparation, they all play such a huge factor into your mental state, like your prayer life, and like just there's so many factors. There's so many contributing factors.
Oh,
But
there absolutely is. And I think too, really as a society as a whole, we don't want to take responsibility. It's so much
right.
easier for us to hand over the responsibility in case anything goes wrong or goes bad. Then we can sit back and say, well, that was the doctor's fault, or the doctor made me do this, when in reality it's all choices we have to make. Even if we hand over our responsibility, that's still on us, that we made that choice to hand over. And then so women can say, well, the doctor said I had to do this. And I know, because I have experience with that. The midwife said it, I needed a C-section or the Pitocin, but ultimately it was me handing over that power to the midwife to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first point in a long line of cascades, the cascade of interventions.
Mm-hmm.
And what a powerful nation we would have, or powerful communities, if mothers really stepped into their design.
Mm-hmm.
I bonded the best with my babies at home.
Mm-hmm.
I breastfed very well with my babies at home. And if we all connected with our babies that way, and if we all felt that really fierce protection over our babies, and we had that connection through breastfeeding and through skin on skin, and all of the things, what would our communities look like, if we didn't hand babies off to people and didn't hand over, feeding our babies to formula. And obviously there are situations where those things are absolutely needed. This is not a blanket statement. I'm just saying, the lack of wanting to take responsibility over the pregnancy and over the birth, I really think that cascades into a long line of disconnect as mothers with our children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I know that we've strayed from our original topics here, but I'm still liking where this conversation is going.
Mhm.
That in our society, it's like we're trained from a young age to think, your pregnancy is a medical event. The birth of your baby is the responsibility of an OBGYN. Your place of birth is supposed to be a hospital. Like, that's the only place people are supposed to be birthing. It is very normal and very regular to have interventions like Pitocin and even antibiotics and epidurals and, C-sections and all the things. It's like we're trained to fear the pain. We're told it's going to be very painful. You're going to, want all this stuff. And we're scaring women. And it's like when you're raised in that your whole life, it is such a hard 180 to revert back to God's original design. And I think what people have a hard time understanding is that, and I could talk about this for hours, but I'll try and make this brief.
I could too.
Is that, less than 100 years ago, everybody was born at home.
Yeah.
Like since the beginning of time, everybody was born at home. And when you grow up that way, and when you grow up with that mentality of birth is normal, we were designed to birth babies, we birth them in our homes where we're going to raise them, and that is the way of life. And when you grow up, as a daughter, like seeing your mom or seeing your sisters or your cousins or your aunts or whatever, and then having those women there who have gone through it to support you and surround you, it's not this scary medical thing. It is this normal, regular part of life, circle of life, like that every woman, well, not every woman, but that most women will go through. And it's just so as it should be. Like, and it's not this big scary thing. It wasn't until, male OBGYNs got involved and hospitals were built and all these, it's like, and there's like a million layers to how it's become what it is today. But it's like people forget that how did the human race live as long as we have without home birth? You know what I mean? It's, and I feel like everyone always says, oh, we have to caveat. Yes, there are situations, there are exceptions, there are, but they're so much less than they have to be. And they're so much rarer than people make them out to be. And it really is, if you really dive into the research and you really dive in down the rabbit hole, if you will, of what causes all of these, quote unquote, poor outcomes, it is the interventions. It is the intervening. It is the ridiculous amount of monitoring of all these extra ultrasounds and all these extra heart rate checks and all these extra, it's like, it's insane because then everyone's scared and it's all about liability and money and getting sued and you look better in a courtroom if you intervene than if you did nothing. Like, it's just, okay, I'm going to get off of my pedestal now. I just want women to know who don't know, I say this in my childbirth class, like obviously I love birth. I love attending births. I love birthing babies myself. I love talking about birth. It's obviously a huge passion of mine, but my biggest passion is probably teaching childbirth classes so that I can help these women learn these things that I didn't know my first time around, that I wish I knew my first time around. Did I have a horrible, traumatic experience with my first? No. But could I have had a better experience? Yes. And especially knowing the experiences I've had now. And it's like my heart breaks when I am with a woman after she's had that traumatic experience and she's coming to me after the fact. And it's like, golly, I'm not God and I can't prevent anything traumatic from happening. But I know that had she been equipped with more knowledge and had she known the true risks and benefits of the choices she was making, or if she even realized that she had choices to make, that the outcome could have been and likely would have been dramatically different. And it's like, people are like, oh, well, as long as we have a healthy mom and a healthy baby, like that's all that matters. That's not all that matters. Like a mom's experience giving birth affects, like you said, the bonding with her child, the beginning of motherhood, like how she's going to parent possibly for years to come. Like it's such a bigger impact than I feel like the medical community makes it out to be.
Absolutely. I completely agree that, we all want a safe, healthy mom. We want a safe, healthy baby, but it really is so much more than just a physically present baby, or a physically alive mom.
Right.
It very much, it's the most sacred event a woman goes through. I mean, the most sacred. And to disrupt that, to have the use of chemicals running through a woman's body, or the gaslighting, or the taking away of the undernourishment, all of it affects so much, and it can really affect the mother and the child for the rest of their lives. And it really, it's such birth is such a sacred event that has to be protected. It has to be protected.
Well, even though I know both you and I could keep talking about this,
I could.
This has been great. I can't thank you enough for coming on here, sharing your stories, sharing your heart, sharing your faith, and then, just sharing your advice and everything. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Cursty.
This has. Yeah, thank you so much, Kayla. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my stories.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You can reach me at Surrendered Birth Services on Instagram, or email me at contact@surrenderedbirthservices.com. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting the follow button. Also, we'd love for you to leave a written review of the show so that more people's births and lives can be changed by the love of Jesus and the empowerment of accurate birth education. If you really enjoyed this episode in particular, please take a screenshot of it and post it to your Instagram story, tagging Surrendered Birth Services. If you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to fill out your interest form. Also, if you're interested in taking my childbirth classes, birth consultations, or having me as your birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to my website for online and in-person options. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.